Yes, very good, David. Um, so let's see. I'm going to introduce Giles. I first met Giles in one of the meetups during the pandemics where he was actually giving this talk. We have since had a chance to work with each other, so therefore it is my pleasure to introduce Giles to you. He is from the UK. You will know that the moment he opens his mouth. He is formerly a CTO and has been a technology leader for over 25 years. He has a long list of accomplishments, including being a fellow in a couple chartered institutes. He's also an enterprise agile coach and a longtime agilist. Today, he is here to discuss the challenges of agile leadership and what our next steps should be. Giles, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Manwei. Cesar as well, thank you for a great intro today, and it's a real pleasure to be here. And I'll start showing my screen in a second, but I've genuinely had the privilege that from meeting Manwei and some other great new members of the Agile family during lockdown, that I've been able to get an opportunity to share this particular talk at a couple of other meetups globally as well. I was speaking at an event, I think last week in Toronto, sharing this. As Manwei said, I've given it in London as well. And there's the hope that I might be able to give it to a group in Asia at some point as well. What's great is that it's about getting us together as a real Agile community, as a real Agile family, sharing learnings, successes, failures, mistakes, the things that I'm going to share today that have caused me the most grief in my career. So without further ado, I will actually start and share my screen. So bear with me 1 second, I will kickstart the presentation, and I will hopefully, I hope everyone can see my screen, and please let me know if you guys can see it. Volker's 2 thumbs up, brilliant. Thank you very much. Manwei's thumbs up as well. Look, so as I said, I'm Giles. This talk is all about the challenges of Agile leadership. Slight pivot on the one I did in Toronto last week, a few different things. And we've got a breakout room session involved in the middle of this, as well as obviously the panel discussion at the end. So look, I hope everyone here, I think it's still morning for you guys. It's just gone 7 p.m. for me here in the UK. I was going to say this evening, but I've still got to say this morning. Is safe and well, and you're relaxed as possible. I don't know who it was who was talking about alcohol earlier, but if needs must. I'm very humbled that I get the opportunity to talk to, all of my new Agile family friends around the world during the lockdown period. It's a unique experience for me. So look, Manwei, Cesar, thank you for arranging this morning. Okay, onwards. So this morning's talk stems from my experiences, successes, failures, as I mentioned, leading Agile adoptions over the last sort of 10 plus years, working with executive teams that have been both, wholly disconnected and truly united. Understanding the journey that Agile leadership has been on to get where it is today. I'm going to be highlighting certain common challenges that Agile champions and leaders frequently face in the workplace, well, at least I certainly do, when trying to create an environment which allows Agile to succeed. Now, these challenges create the most amount of friction with our jobs daily and actually need resolving in the present before Agile leadership in the future further evolves. As I'm going to mention often, the Agile Manifesto has been around for nearly 20 years. We're 6 months away, or whatever it is, from the 20th anniversary of when it was signed. And yet we're still experiencing issues with these Agile ways of working that we were facing back in 2010 or even earlier. Agile leadership in 2030 will be no different from now, unless we resolve these challenges first of all. So, as Manwei certainly knows, I'm passionate about responsible leadership. And I've spent the last few years of my career trying to give back to the Agile community by sharing those learnings and mistakes and telling stories as well, making it personal. of the importance of making sure we do have the right leadership at the start of our organization. I also believe now that as we spend sort of more time with these new ways of working, these new norms, due to COVID, we need that leadership, that agile leadership, to be as successful as possible to help make our organizations succeed. So, the purpose of this talk is to look at some of the challenges that are limiting agile leadership from being truly successful in the workplace and uncovering some of the reasons why this is happening. In understanding what and where agile leadership needs to be in 2020 and beyond, we need to understand where agile may be perceived to be today as it enters its third decade in the workplace. Now, I often share these thought-provoking perceptions from those both inside and outside the community at talks like this to see how they kind of match to the experiences of the experts in the audience, and hopefully we can discuss some of those in the discussion afterwards. So how is it perceived today? As a cultural ideology, as the goal, as just about doing and not about being agile, as being too prescriptive and bureaucratic, as being fake, as only about implementing parts of the process, a tool for software development only, all about scaling and brands, methodologies and transformations, and all those other amazing buzzwords, as the whole answer, as a tick in the box exercise, just about qualifications, possibly as agile theatre. So I'm here today, as I've said, to share some of the things I've repeatedly experienced in my career that limit the success of agile leadership. And this is going to be a real opportunity for us all to collaborate and help get our organizations to overcome these hurdles we have and to become genuinely more agile. Next, I want to share questions I ask on arrival whenever I join somewhere new in a traditional technology leadership role. Are we entering into the adoption for the right reasons? Do we understand the why? Are we implementing a way of working within which agile teams can really flourish? Does our organizational leadership behave with an agile mindset and not just with agile words? Do we have top-down, and I would even say bottom-up buy-in to the adoption of the agile processes? Is our organization operating in silos or as a system with synergies? Do we have the right set of building blocks for our desired agility level? Are our agile successes being limited by the culture? And finally, is our agile leadership fully supported throughout the organization? Now, to understand why we need agile leadership, we need to understand why organizations want or need to become agile in the first place. So let's begin with why these same organizations actually aspire to be agile. Previous surveys by Deloitte and McKinsey show that more than 90% of senior management in technology organizations are giving high priority to the mandate of making these same organizations, drum roll please, agile. Now, the popularity of this way of working clearly shows that modern day agile approaches deliver those superior results compared to those of traditional approaches. And I suppose that's where this aspirational mandate is being driven from. But despite this, less than 10% actually consider their organization to be performing with any kind of high level of agility. According to a McKinsey Global Agile Survey, I think done in 2018, more than 80% of respondents say their organizations have undertaken a digital transformation initiative within the last 5 years. A mere 16% reported a success, but only 3% claimed a successful, sustained transformation. The shocking. The results from the respondents who did report a success, the 16%, point to 5 categories in order of importance, all of which make a transformation more likely to succeed. As we see here, they are on the screen. Leadership, capability building, empowering workers, upgrading tools, and communication. But again, it's leadership sat at the top of the list. Now, these categories suggest where and how organizations can start to improve the chances of successfully making major step changes to their business. But it still seems mind-blowing that nearly 20 years on, we are continually identifying the same criteria time and time again to make these transformations successful, but doing little about it to make the changes last. So this seemingly large delta between aspiration and reality has led to many organizations claiming to be agile when clearly they're not, especially if, according to the results, they do not have the right leadership in place to help bring about the required changes to improve on that 3% score. What is agile leadership? Now, I'm not going to focus too much of the talk today on this particular topic, but I do want to share what I believe agile leadership is, who an agile leader may be, and some of the attributes that I think make a great leader. And this actually comes from another talk I do, who is an agile leader and what do they do? So I'll share this with you today. So look, I want to share what I believe agile leadership is, as I said. And I believe agile leadership is the practice of creating change that helps build a truly agile organization. In a nutshell, that's it. You know, these agile leaders will have that passion for learning, open innovation, developing people, and can communicate and create the vision of that organization. I also believe it's the craft of creating the right context for self-organization within an environment where agile teams collaborate, learn from each other, get quick feedback from users, and are focused on quality and continuous learning. Now, these leaders do not micromanage the people, but they also don't create total freedom. They balance the anarchy and strict structure that's crucial in today's organizations. Developing, and some would say more importantly, maintaining this right environment is often very hard work. These leaders focus on principles such as designing and improving the culture, facilitating teams to take ownership, coaching these teams to understand the agile mindset, promoting the learning and feedback from the experiments and the failures, and co-creating long-term goals with the teams so that they know what they're aiming to achieve. Additionally, these agile leaders have to operate well in a wide range of circumstances, especially new, changing, challenging, and often ambiguous situations as well. So, who in an organization is an agile leader? Think of the role of the agile leader as a placeholder for whatever you decide to call the role. It's going to depend somewhat on your organization and how you organize your work accordingly. An agile leader, for example, could be a coach, could be a senior executive, could be a product owner, a project manager, a scrum master, a release train engineer, a coordinator. The list goes on and on and on. But one mistake I have wrongly seen happen several times in my career: you don't necessarily need to go out and hire someone specifically as an agile leader within your organization. You may already have many agile leaders. Now, for whoever's in the position, it's a critical function and it needs to be a key part of an organization for any complex cross-functional endeavor that involves more than a handful of teams. The person or persons in the role needs to be motivated, dedicated, and skilled, living and breathing the Agile mindset and philosophy that supports it. Now, the reason I say persons is that the Agile leader doesn't necessarily need to be one person. It can be a pair, a small close-knit team, as long as they collaborate tightly and speak with one voice. While it seems obvious, these leaders need to not only be strategic, but also effectively lead in the present to address any issues or challenges the team may be currently facing. They must also inspire creativity and innovation within the employees so that as the organization moves forward, employees are directly contributing to its successes. Look, you can't rely on what worked yesterday to solve tomorrow's problems. So Agile leaders need to use their experiences as a tool, but mustn't rely on it solely to solve problems. These leaders take pride in being resilient and creative in what they accomplish by ultimately being flexible and open to change. Agile leaders are those who can adapt to an ever-changing and uncertain environment. Now, learning from this prepares them to handle whatever happens next and makes them those excellent role models for others. Agile leaders constantly challenge beliefs and assumptions so they can meet the needs of the moment versus clinging onto a cause that is perhaps already lost. And Agile leaders need to navigate uncharted waters, ambiguity and chaos on a daily basis, all the while remaining fully connected with the team or teams. Next, in uncovering who our Agile leaders are or may be within an organization, their leadership will have a positive effect on that same organization at two distinct levels: the structural level and the behavioral level. Now, on the structural level, Agile leadership will affect all the things like processes, roles, responsibilities, key performance indicators, and so on. On the behavioral level, it refers to those specific actions being taken by these Agile leaders in those certain situations that are underpinned by those particular mindsets and abilities they have. Taken together, these structural and behavioral effects mutually reinforce each other and culminate in a leadership experience that extends its influence across the entirety of the organization. Now, talking of influence, the following points for me are key to understanding the role of the Agile leader. Leaders and managers, both, mobilize people and resources and explain the vision. But that's where the similarities end. Leaders focus on goals. Managers focus on tasks. Leaders take risks. Managers mitigate risks. Leaders sell it. You can see where this is going. Managers tell it. Leaders go against the grain. Managers go with the flow. Leaders motivate. Managers approve. Leaders inspire trust. Managers expect control. Leaders foster ideas. Managers assign tasks. Leaders innovate. Managers use what works. And as such, Michael Sahota wrote in a blog post last year, anyone can be an Agile leader. It's about how we show up and what we value. It's not about a formal role such as a manager. Now we're going to try something new. And Munway and I thought it'd be fun to use, obviously, the Zoom breakout room feature and group ourselves into X number of people that Munway is going to tell us about, and discuss the following question for the next 10 minutes to see what we can all learn from one another. So, our breakout room question: Does genuine Agile leadership exist in 2020? And if not, what do you think is stopping it? So Manwei, I'm going to hand back over to you.
All right, so let's see. We have 3 breakout rooms. 2 rooms have 4 people in it, and 1 room has 5 people in it. And we have 10 minutes for this wonderful discussion.
So let's crack on with the next part of the talk, which are the challenges themselves. So, as I do often, conferences, meetups, how I met Manwei, especially on topics I'm passionate about, I like to share those most common, most often experienced, as we were talking in the breakout room, and possibly those hardest challenges that I see faced most often in my career, so 26 years as a software engineer. That are those limitations and blockers for me in my quest for being that agile and technology leader, shall we say, enabling agility the best way possible I can throughout organizations that I'm part of. Now, I'm not necessarily providing the answers for these, otherwise I wouldn't be here doing this talk today. But I'm going to share and highlight the challenges and some of the things that we can do together to limit them, which hopefully you'll see follows a well-trodden path of recurring patterns, which then become opportunities for us all as an Agile community to help truly solve together. I'm going to explain a little bit more about that at the end of the talk this afternoon. I also hope that none of the challenges I'm going to talk about are new to anyone here, but I bet a lot of you have suffered from some or all of these at some point. And no doubt you're probably experiencing some of them right now. So if I click away, challenge number 1, where organizations wrongly claim to be agile.
Giles, you might want to share your screen, I suppose.
Oh, has it stopped sharing? Sorry, apologies, I wasn't aware it had actually stopped sharing. But I will do that right now. I presumed it had automatically came back.
I think the breakout rooms kill sharing.
I didn't realize, and now something I've learned today. So, okay, challenge number 1. So what you missed previously was simply a pretty picture of a mountain where I talk about the challenges. So challenge number 1, where organizations wrongly claim to be agile. The term agile is often applied to those organizations that have actually no substantive claim to any kind of agility whatsoever, right? I mean, come on. The usage wrongly leads to many organizations being called agile, even though they're managed through traditional bureaucracy, traditional micromanagement without any true agile leadership. This over-eagerness to self-identify as agile has created fake agile or agile theatre among organizations that misunderstand or simply choose to ignore the true application of agility. Now, to understand whether an organization is agile, you have to look beyond what they're saying and what they're reporting. You have to look at how they are operating. Some of the most successful organizations that have implemented an agile way of working don't even use the standard terminology of agile or worry about calling themselves agile at all. This is also known as agile without the label. Their agility, coupled with that great leadership, is an important reason why they've become the most valuable organizations in the world. The uncomplimentary phrase, agile in name only, applies to organizations that have too narrow a focus and are only implementing parts of the processes while ignoring leadership, culture, structures, governance, and without embracing the agile philosophy and values which are shared and embodied, hopefully, by the agile leaders. To avoid uncomfortable scrutiny, some organizations even cover themselves in agile camouflage. borrowing the ceremonies and vernacular of Agile methods and frameworks without fundamentally changing their underlying work habits or having the correct leaders in the organization to change this. Ultimately, these organizations are simply doing Agile without truly being Agile. There is often a lack of commitment seemingly throughout that organization. They don't understand why the change is happening and are not committing to what is necessary to actually achieve it. As mentioned earlier, this claim by organizations calling themselves Agile can never be genuine if they do not have the right leadership, sharing that philosophy and set of values, enabling that required change and evolution to happen. To be truly Agile, an organization today needs to operate in a very different way, with leadership, values, norms, all reinforcing the philosophy and culture. If you're an Agile leader coming into an organization that is resisting change and operating by doing Agile in name only, this is a substantial hurdle to overcome. Some might say it's even impossible. Challenge number 2, where Agile is for the software teams only. The Agile Manifesto and corresponding principles were originally written for the context of software development, for people like me. And it was intended to address issues that software teams were facing in the late 1990s and early 2000s. The fact that the wording of the manifesto is limited to software development is less than adequate as a definition of business or organizational agility for today or the future, meaning that there's still a very real need for the manifesto to further evolve. When Agile processes are introduced, some might say sometimes forced, upon software teams in traditionally managed organizations without the right coaching or leadership, they run into conflict with other parts of that business that have much more bureaucracy, command and control, and are less flexible to change. Organizations will still be behaving in exactly the same way in 2030 unless we all work together today to bring about a major change to organizational design and current ways of thinking. Because the most current and most widely shared definition of Agile is all about software engineering. Senior management often become confused asking, isn't Agile for software only? Now, as I've personally experienced far too often, non-Agile leaders of an organization undergoing a change or evolution or transformation or whatever you and your organization call it, think all that's involved is the software teams learning a new framework. Now, as an Agile leader, I've had to coach many senior managers and executives on those Agile foundation courses to help them understand what it's all about. Therefore, understanding the Agile philosophy, being able to manifest those values at all business levels is critical for the Agile leader to help build and grow that truly Agile organization now in 2020 and in the future. In arriving at this software-only perception, without the right leadership and philosophy in place, Agile ends up often as just a couple of pieces of the process cobbled together, maybe some sprints for some development purposes, but with no adoption within the rest of the organization, often intensifying the idea that Agile is simply the coding part, which senior managers believe don't require other elements, departments, actors involved in that overall process. This again creates a version of fake Agile within that same organization and limits the idea that Agile actually refers to the ability of that organization to rapidly respond to change and continuously improve. If you're an Agile leader brought into this kind of environment that is unaware it needs to change or is simply resisting it, you need to find ways and try different approaches to enable that agility throughout the whole enterprise, and not only just have it working for the software teams, to remove those large parts of organizational friction. Now, this can be achieved by things like systemic coaching, sharing the why, learning from other organizations, introducing communities of practice and experience, finding your organizational champions, creating the right ways of working, as well as possibly introducing other organizational changes, like beyond budgeting for finance departments, and transforming human resources departments into people teams, and having them lead this organizational change with their broad reach. Now, I personally have a hang-up with the phrase human resources. For me, it categorizes us all in the same way as office resources or computers or desks or chairs when we're far from it. And there will be many other items that we as a group can add to this list, and I would genuinely love to hear afterwards and learn from those who have successful approaches to applying agility throughout their companies. I'd also like to hear about those approaches that also don't work. The idea that Agile should operate across the entire organization, business agility, is not necessarily new, but it can only be a positive thing. And I hope everyone here agrees. The Agile business can then become more adaptive, flexible, creative, resilient when dealing with complexity, uncertainty, and change, leading to improved well-being and better outcomes. Challenge number 3, as I always say, this was one of my favorites, where Agile is disliked by the command and control gang. What's annoying about Agile to control-minded management at any level within an organization, but especially prevalent with middle or senior middle management in my personal experience, is that it recognizes a very big problem lies in control itself, especially when this gang worships at the altar of conformance and are not flexible to adapt and change. This same group seem to have the loudest voices, but lack the authority to make the necessary structural changes and are given misaligned incentives, leading to traditional behaviors to surface. Reconciling Agile execution and innovation lies in giving greater freedom to those doing the work, being able to exercise their talents and creativity, but doing so within short cycles so they themselves can see whether they are making progress or not. Even worse for hierarchical control, Agile leadership thrives on transparency. One of the dirty, not so little secrets of traditional middle management is that control thrives on non-transparency, especially when they continually follow the ideology of controlism from the top down. So introducing Agile leadership means exposing all those non-transparent tricks that hierarchical managers play on their subordinates to maintain power. Is it any wonder then that Agile isn't naturally popular with the command and control gang, and as such it will not succeed if they do not allow it to flourish within an organization? There have been many well-documented situations, look, you only have to go and Google it, where an Agile transformation or evolution didn't deliver the expected improvements within the organization, or even failed and was ultimately stopped because of the involvement of this gang. Those who don't pliantly follow this group become an obstacle in their mind and not a benefit. With such defenders of controlism, who needs enemies? So, when advocating a new approach or a new way of working, it is natural to openly highlight the flaws of the current ways of doing things. That's natural. If everything were perfect, why should people listen to us? This is where the biggest friction comes from. Agile leaders and coaches have suggested many ways to deal with organizations that have a command and control management style. For example, by assessing if an organization is truly ready or not for Agile in the first place, before even thinking about whether there's a future for it as well. These same leaders also need to be wary of the damage from anti-Agile propaganda from within this group, which will also limit the success of any adoption taking place. If an organization genuinely wants Agile and its leadership to succeed, then the hardest lesson for this command and control gang is learning to trust, such an important word, the Agile leaders and the talented people in the teams, then recognizing when to get out of their way. It's down to us all to help guide and coach the best way possible to allow this to happen and help remove that resistance to change. Challenge number 4, where Agile is constrained by bureaucracy. One thing hasn't changed with the popularity of Agile. There is still loads of pressure from the top down. Now, I hope you all agree, but personally I believe in an ideal organization, C-levels should, if not must, transform and promote the Agile changes too. I should know being one. And I've worked with some amazing technology leaders and mentors who have done this throughout my career. And I'm sure you probably all have similar people in mind too. But I've also worked with those C-levels who haven't supported and promoted the changes, believing that they somehow know better when clearly they don't. In many companies I and Agile colleagues have worked in, it's still not often the case today where they revert back to the only processes and behaviors they know, believing that they somehow understand how to deliver better than those Agile leaders who look after the teams and the outcomes daily. Agile leadership will be stuck in a perpetual loop and won't evolve if we continue to experience this resistance and friction. One author, Gary Hamel, gave a vivid description of bureaucracy and this top-down pressure in a front-page Harvard Business Review article titled "Bureaucracy Must Die," that summed it up as strategy gets set at the top, power trickles down. Big leaders appoint little leaders. Individuals compete for promotion. Compensation correlates with rank. Tasks are assigned. Managers assess performance. Rules tightly circumscribe discretion. And as such, these same executives are still focusing on snapping their fingers, trying to become Agile magically, also known as the Agile Harry Potter syndrome, often without any care or understanding the why, hoping for a faster time to market, which ultimately never comes for them or anyone else. Or, as I often see, simply choosing to ignore it altogether. As I've experienced, certainly within the last 10 years, there are some in senior management circles, and as I always say, I do not call them senior leadership here, that don't understand what Agile actually is, and sometimes don't even want to understand. I once had a rather ignorant line manager in a CIO that used to say of the Agile way of working to myself and others, "What is that Agile thing you do?" Even if I told him 20 times a week. Now, I once got an apology, fact, from the people we were talking to in a large meeting after he said it and walked away. Needless to say, less than 6 months later, he was no longer the CIO. The same group sometimes mistakenly think it may be some new kind of anti-bureaucracy, voodoo, associating it with a lack of control or management, a chaotic free-for-all, if you like, with no plan, which leads to a lack of a coherent, coordinated approach across the organization, i.e., no clear view of the changes which together lead to desired outcomes. Or possibly through an element of fear. They believe they will lose control of the processes on one hand and the products on the other, and not be able to make changes to them as and when they see fit. Senior management often experiences friction with those new agile ways of working, often due to a lack of the education of the journey being taken, even if they are the ones who mandated the change in the first place, or a lack of coaching to understand the why, or a lack of trust of the people who are responsible to deliver, or even simply just due to a general resistance to change, wrongly thinking it'll cost too much, often due to the need of required roles to deliver successfully, even after streamlining teams to begin with, or losing sight of the real goal, which is achieving successful business outcomes, not simply doing agile as some sort of tick in a box exercise to say the company is now agile. Now, big reveal moment. Drum roll, please. I would like to see everybody drum rolling away, please. It's not all their fault. A fundamental issue for senior management here is that the standard vocabulary of Agile, born from the foundations of frameworks like Scrum, was devised purposefully to be unattractive to this same management group. Now, I understand why that happened, but do not understand why it hasn't since evolved over the last 19 years. One thing all Agile leaders and coaches have to be very mindful of is that these same frameworks have offered little or zero guidance to those people who actually have to change the most. We as an Agile community at times seem to have completely missed the fact that the people who need the most coaching and support are those senior managers who are in charge. Now, it seems crazy to believe, but I've only seen this being openly discussed for the last few years. Yet we've been working in Agile ways for nearly 20 years. Did we all hope this friction would simply disappear, or were we, including myself, wearing blinkers the whole time? A lot of managers I know aren't actively fighting Agile. They simply haven't understood how it applies to their roles or how to perform those roles in ways that enhance that genuine agility. So, because of a lack of support and education, iterative change has become so fast with these Agile ways of working that big hierarchical bureaucracies, easy for me to say, cannot cope. And in turn, that means senior management cannot cope with the pace of Agile either. Sending commands up and down the management ladder is simply too slow and cumbersome, and causes further friction if not managed properly by the correct leaders and coaches. The voice of the customer is often lost in the battles up and down this same management ladder, with those at the top being so far removed from the customer and the work being done to even truly know what is going on, let alone understanding how to respond to it. They fixate on wanting to change things like organizational culture, but not in an Agile way. Producing 50-page IT roadmaps that'll be out of date within 3 months, without understanding that they need to change first of all and become supportive of what is going on already. If organizations are not careful, these new Agile ways of working can wrongly become rediverted into yet another company reorganization, driven by the same senior management wanting to get control back over what is happening in the organization, creating even further change fatigue and making it less likely to succeed, being part of the opposite 97% statistic that I mentioned at the start. I've heard people talk of the soul of a department being ripped out with changes like this, especially when the Agile leaders are also let go. This invariably leads wrongly to a negative way of organizing, a woo, instead of a positive way of working, a wow, and will create even further friction within an Agile adoption and make it far less likely to succeed. If I was a betting man and I could see the future, I would be able to make a ton of money right now on the fact that in 2030, organizations will still be operating the same way, as norms and ways of workings will still not evolve if we all here are not leading this change right now. I think this cartoon sums it up pretty well. Who wants change? Who wants to change? Well, Mark Buchan, someone else in the Agile leadership space, recently did another version of this. Who wants change? Who's willing to change? Who's capable of change? I like this one better. The Business Agility Report 29 preface stated, "The report is a sobering account of the obstacles along the way, particularly in larger organizations that suffer from risk-averse cultures, organizational silos, bureaucratic layers, workforce passivity, traditional mindsets, and above all, lack of strongly supportive leadership at the top." Come on. This resolutely maps back to the results of the McKinsey survey I shared at the start. To make any adoption, transformation, evolution, whatever you call it, a success, you need the right leadership in place. The hard truth today is that Agile and traditional bureaucratic management still don't get along. I don't know why. And yet we all need to work harder to change this. In repeated polls of people working in many different organizations globally, where Agile is being implemented, somewhere between 70 to 90% reported tension between the way Agile teams are run and the way the rest of the organization is managed. Agile leadership throughout an organization is a lot harder than traditional leadership. If you're doing it right, you care a whole lot more. Often these Agile leaders are the filter between harsh top-level objectives and truly trying to motivate their teams, making a difference and enabling successful delivery. Agile leaders must help organizations and those senior managers understand it's not a new level of anti-bureaucracy and that they will not lose control of their products, and understand that they need to help coach the senior management team to understand what it is they are committing to, which I believe is a quote from W. Edwards Deming. They must also ensure they are providing the guidance required and advising the senior managers of the approaches being taken by the teams, bringing them on the same journey. And finally, they need to be part of the success criteria to help senior managers to become senior leaders. An Agile leader is by necessity someone who lives and models this Agile mindset and philosophy, someone who is pragmatic, knowledgeable, flexible, open, respectful and responsive, not prescriptive and bureaucratic. So this leads nicely on to the last challenge. Challenge number 5, where organizations have a fixed or traditional mindset. As discussed earlier, organizations that are very agile often shy away from the label agile, or are moving away from a particular brand and are using their own homegrown words, which feels more genuine. The main difference between those organizations that can claim to be genuinely agile and those that can't is for a large part down to those adopting an agile mindset at its core, from its people and culture to its structure and technology, i.e. being agile and not just simply doing agile. Those leaders that adapt to the continuum of agile will see the improvements over time versus those leaders that don't adapt due to their fixed mindset, where they go through the motions of just doing agile because of some wider organizational directive. If this mindset doesn't happen, then that organizational culture will never improve, even if senior management thinks it'll be just fine that way. However, as non-agile leaders wrongly believe, the agile mindset does not simply see things in a polarized view, i.e. agile or not. An agile mindset is that set of attitudes that support a truly agile working environment. And these are going to include things like respect, collaboration, improvement and learning cycles, pride in ownership, focusing on delivering value, courage and experimentation, and the ability to adapt to change. This mindset is necessary for those agile leaders to help cultivate those high-performing teams who in turn deliver amazing value for their customers. The mindset is also independent of frameworks, terminology, labels, proprietary processes, or particular brands, and helps with fixing the perception of whether an organization can truly claim to be agile or not. If this mindset is cultivated by the leaders and nourished, the teams will experience amazing outcomes, happy employees delivering great value and great results. Ultimately, Agile is all about embracing that different mindset or philosophy. Agile is not a system, not a methodology, not a platform, not an organizational structure. In my experience, when people and organizations have the right leaders and mindset, you know what, it hardly matters what tools, processes, and practices they are using. It makes things come out right. Conversely, if they don't have the right leaders and mindset, it doesn't matter if they're implementing every tool and process and practice and procedure exactly according to the book. No benefits will flow. And I have experienced this more than probably anything else. The agile mindset is the environment within which teams truly flourish, enabled and supported by great, responsible leaders. If we want agile leadership to succeed in the future, then we need to collaborate, evolve, and overcome these 5 challenges I've mentioned today in the present as a priority, and no doubt many others that are priorities for you all here today too. So finally, the journey for successful leadership. As I've mentioned many times here today, this afternoon, hopefully now, that Agile is that embraced philosophy and that set of values brought about by having the right Agile leaders and ways of working supporting the people and culture. It isn't a methodology to implement within the existing management framework. Agile is all about working smarter rather than harder. It's not about doing more work in less time, or as some people wrongly believe, doing twice the work in half the time. It's about generating more value and better outcomes with less work. You don't do Agile if you simply want the benefits. You have to be Agile. When you have the right Agile leaders and coaches, the teams deliver within a business model that generates value for the whole organization, as well as the customers. As Agile leaders, our goal should not just be about implementing Agile. Our goal instead is about enabling successful business outcomes. All said and done, Agile leaders are the key to enabling people and organizations to have the courage, knowledge, and belief to be truly successful. My parting thoughts. True Agile leaders embrace every aspect of agility. Set a clear vision that their team can embrace and own. Believe in their mission and live it on a daily basis. Build a culture of self-organizing teams. Can create an environment that allows Agile to flourish. focuses on what really matters, delivering value. Helps their team members take care of the customers, and ultimately are awesome. So the challenges wrap up. As I mentioned at the start of the talk, the purpose of this talk was not necessarily to provide the solutions or answers for these, but to share the challenges which impact how successfully that agile leadership can happen and exist in the workplace, which then happens to become a catalyst and opportunities for us all as leaders to solve together, especially if they are being pervasive in our organizations today. This leads nicely on to my last slide. Final question, and have your say. What is agile leadership for you, and what are your agile challenges? Now, on screen, you'll see a QR code and a short URL that will take you to a 2-minute agile survey I'm running throughout 2020, where you can answer this and a couple of other questions as well. The outcome of this research is going to be a report of the big challenges that are still affecting agile leaders and agile adoptions within our organizations nearly 20 years on since the launch of the Agile Manifesto, and what we all need to do together to resolve them. It's going to be published in a white paper in early 2021 to coincide with the 20th anniversary of the manifesto. Now, I hope I can come back at a future event and share the findings from this, leading on to further workshops, projects, collaborations on overcoming many of these challenges, through Agile champions helping to provide and share answers, solutions to them, and allowing these ways of working to simply become commonplace in organizations over the next decade and beyond, enabling greater business agility and responsible leadership to be successful. Thank you everyone for listening to me today.